I'd been single for a while, almost 2 years. My last relationship ended on good terms, just faded out like a sunset. Honestly, I was too wrapped up in architecture school and projects to think about dating much. It wasn't that I didn't want someone, I just didn't know what I was looking for. But there were times I missed that feeling of being close to someone who really got me. My buddy Jake was always pushing me to go out, saying I was too in my own head and needed to let loose. So one Friday night, when he insisted I come to an art gallery event downtown, I figured why not? A little spontaneity might be good for me. That's when I saw her. She was standing in front of a massive, chaotic painting, all violent reds and blacks, completely absorbed in it. She wore this deep red dress that seemed to glow under the gallery lights, and her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder. I was drawn to her before I even realized what was happening. I'd never seen anyone so alive. I went over and made some dumb joke about modern art, expecting her to laugh or maybe ignore me. But instead, she launched into an intense defense of the painting, explaining every chaotic brushstroke as if she knew its secrets. Her eyes lit up, and I was transfixed. "Want to grab a drink and tell me more about how I don't get modern art?" I asked, half joking, half hoping. She looked me over, sizing me up with a smirk. "Sure, but it'll be your treat." Our first date was the very next weekend at this jazz bar she knew, one of those places with dim lighting and music that soaked into the walls. She ordered a Negroni, saying it matched her soul, and laughed, a throaty, intoxicating sound. By the end of the night, I was hooked. Jess was everything I didn't know I needed. She was magnetic, quick-witted, and intense. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world, like she could see through me. She'd send texts that made my heart race, leave little notes in my apartment hinting at how much she cared. She seemed to know exactly what I wanted before I even knew it myself. I was in awe of her. But over time, things changed. Her intensity became possessive, her attentiveness obsessive. She'd show up unannounced, accuse me of hiding things if I took too long to respond to a text. She'd grab my phone out of nowhere, scrolling through it, demanding to know why I'd liked a friend's photo or who I'd been with after class. If I was even 5 minutes late, she'd call me repeatedly, her voice frantic, as if I'd vanished. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that she was just passionate. But the more I tried to give her space, the tighter she held on. Every conversation became a minefield. By the time I finally broke up with her, it felt less like heartbreak and more like coming up for air. For a few weeks, everything was quiet. I thought she'd moved on. But then, the messages started. At first, they were apologetic, saying she missed me and that she'd been too intense because she'd loved me too much. When I didn't respond, they got darker. She'd write things like, "You'll regret this," or "I can't live without you." I blocked her number, but somehow the messages kept coming from different numbers. I tried to ignore her, hoping she'd finally give up. But she didn't. And things only got worse. One night I came home late from work and found a box on my doorstep. Inside was a scrapbook of photos from our relationship. It should have been nostalgic, but something was wrong. Most of the photos were from private moments, times I didn't remember her taking any pictures. She'd annotated each page in red ink. Next to a photo of us at a cafe, she'd written, "I know where you are, always." At the end of the book, there was a photo of me asleep in my bed, taken recently, long after we'd broken up. I felt my skin crawl. I told my friends, and they urged me to call the police, but I didn't think they'd take it seriously. After all, it was just a scrapbook, right? A few nights later, I set up a camera in my apartment, hoping I'd catch her in the act. And I did. Around 2 a.m., Jess appeared outside my bedroom window. She just stood there, staring in at me, her face pressed against the glass. She wasn't moving, just watching. After a few minutes, she pulled out a long strand of her hair and taped it to the window before disappearing into the night. I reported this to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless she made a direct threat. I felt helpless, trapped. A few days later, I decided to stay at my friend's place, thinking that maybe putting some distance between us would make her lose interest. But a few nights later, Jake woke me up in a panic. He handed me his phone, his face pale. It was a text from Jess. "You can't hide from me. I know where you sleep." That night, I barely slept, every creak of the floor making my heart race. My friend insisted I find a new place to stay, somewhere she couldn't find me. I went to a hotel across town, hoping for some peace, but on the third night, I woke up to tapping on the hotel room window. Heart pounding, I got out of bed and pulled back the curtain, praying it was just a tree branch or a mistake. It was Jess. She stood outside my window on the second floor, balancing on the narrow ledge. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on me. She didn't move, just kept staring, her mouth slightly open in an unnatural grin. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the bed as I called the front desk. When I looked back, she was gone. The police finally issued a restraining order, but it didn't change anything. I didn't feel safe, not in my apartment, not anywhere. The last message I got from her was a single sentence that still haunts me. "You'll always belong to me." I've since moved across the country, changed my number, and tried to build a new life. But every now and then, in a crowded place or a quiet room, I'll feel like I'm being watched. Sometimes I'll get a call from an unknown number, and when I answer, there's only silence. I never see her face anymore, but somehow I know she's still there. It's been over a year since I broke things off with Emma. We were intense from the start, fiery, passionate, the kind of relationship that was thrilling one moment, exhausting the next. When she moved in with me, her jealousy showed up too. She'd interrogate me about every woman in my life, even accuse me of cheating when I stayed late at work. She'd scroll through my messages, convinced there was something I was hiding. I should have left sooner, but I kept thinking it would get better. When I finally ended it, she didn't take it well. She cried, begged, even swore she'd change. Then came the anger, the relentless calls and messages. Eventually, she fell silent, and for a couple of months I thought it was over. Then one morning I got a text from an unknown number. "I miss us," it said. I deleted it, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't unnerve me. The messages started coming every few days after that. Simple, wistful, almost innocent. "Thinking of you. Remember when we went to the lake?" I ignored them, told myself they were harmless, that she'd move on soon enough. But the messages didn't stop. Instead, they got darker. One night, I was about to fall asleep when my phone lit up. "Do you ever think of me?" "I think of you. Every night." The chill I felt reading that text lingered, but I didn't reply, hoping silence would discourage her. One Friday night, I was out late with friends. When I got home, a rose was waiting on my doorstep. Its petals were a deep blood red, the kind Emma loved. I kicked it aside, trying to laugh it off, but there was a note folded beneath it that read, "Remember me?" I threw the rose in the trash and locked the door, feeling a dull ache of dread settle in my stomach. After that, the roses started appearing everywhere. In my car, at my work desk, even in the pockets of my jacket. Each one had a note, some longer, others just those same 2 words. "Remember me?" The notes kept coming. I'd find them on my windshield in the mornings, or crumpled in my mailbox. My friends thought it was creepy, but they tried to reassure me. "She's just trying to mess with you," they said. But I wasn't so sure. I started checking the locks on my doors 3 times before bed, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night just to make sure they were still secure. But each morning, another rose waited for me. I finally went to the police, but without any direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I change my number, so I did, feeling a little bit safer. For a couple of weeks, the roses stopped, and I started to relax, thinking maybe she'd finally let go. Then, one night, I woke to the sound of whispering, my name, drifting from somewhere in the darkness of my room. I froze, holding my breath, my eyes adjusting to the shadows. "Remember me?" The voice was soft, barely audible but unmistakable. My heart pounded as I reached for my bedside lamp, flicking it on. The room was empty. No roses, no notes, nothing. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a trick of the mind, but I barely slept that night. The next day, I came home to find my living room filled with rose petals. They were scattered across the floor, leading toward my bedroom. I followed the trail, heart pounding, and found a single rose lying on my pillow. Attached was a note that read, "You'll never forget me." I packed a bag that night and stayed with a friend. I thought maybe the distance would help, that if I wasn't alone, she'd stop. But around 3 a.m., my friend shook me awake, his face pale. "Dude," he whispered, handing me his phone. On the screen was a text message from an unknown number. "You can't hide from me. I know where you are." I barely slept, every creak in the house making me jump. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. For a while, things were quiet. No more messages, no roses, and I started to believe she'd finally let go. Then, 2 months later, I came home to find a small, dark velvet box on my doorstep. Inside was a single rose petal and a note that read, "See you soon." I moved across the country that month, changed my number again, left everything behind. I've started to rebuild my life, making new friends, and keeping my past locked away. But sometimes, when I'm out at night or alone in my apartment, I swear I can feel someone watching me. Occasionally, I'll find a red petal slipped between the pages of a book or under my doormat. I've stopped trying to forget her. Some things, no matter how far you run, are impossible to escape. I never thought I'd find love again after everything that happened with Jessica. Our relationship was a whirlwind, intense, passionate, and ultimately destructive. She had a smile that could light up the darkest corners of my soul, but behind it lurked an obsession that slowly chipped away at my sanity. After we broke up, I was finally free, or so I thought. I met Mia at a coffee shop one rainy afternoon. She was everything Jessica wasn't: gentle, nurturing, and fiercely independent. It felt good to be with someone who cherished me, not someone who suffocated me. As our relationship blossomed, I tried my best to leave the past behind, but Jessica's shadow lingered, haunting my thoughts. One night, Mia and I went to a small fair on the outskirts of town. The lights twinkled against the dark sky, and laughter filled the air. As we strolled through the crowd, hand in hand, I felt a sense of hope for the future. Maybe this was my chance to start anew. But in the back of my mind, I could feel it: Jessica's presence. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but I could sense she was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Just as I began to let my guard down, my phone buzzed. I looked down, my heart sinking when I saw her name flashing on the screen. "Hey, it's me. Can we talk?" I hesitated, glancing at Mia. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, blissfully unaware of the turmoil churning inside me. I knew I should ignore Jessica, but curiosity gnawed at me. I walked a few steps away, my heart pounding, and answered, "Jessica, why did you leave me?" Her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "I thought we were meant to be. You can't just abandon me like that." I had to move on. Our relationship was toxic, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Move on? You think you can just forget me? I won't let you. I'll always be a part of you." As I hung up, dread filled my stomach. I returned to Mia, who was blissfully enjoying a candied apple, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern flashing across her face. "Yeah, just an old friend," I lied, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The following weeks were a blur. Jessica's messages became increasingly erratic, filled with anger and despair. She sent me photos of us together, reminders of happier times, but they only made my heart ache. I tried to cut her off completely, but it was like trying to sever a dark tendril that had wrapped itself around my soul. Then one evening, everything spiraled out of control. Mia and I were driving home from dinner when I saw her, a familiar figure standing on the sidewalk, her hair illuminated by the streetlights. It was Jessica. My breath caught in my throat. "Mia, slow down," I said, panic rising in my chest. "What? Why?" she asked, confused. Just trust me." But before I could warn her, Jessica stepped into the road. I screamed, but it was too late. The sickening thud of metal against flesh echoed in my ears. Mia's eyes widened in horror as we came to a sudden stop. I jumped out of the car, my heart racing. "Jessica!" I yelled, running to her. She lay sprawled on the asphalt, her body limp, eyes staring into the void. My heart shattered as I knelt beside her, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. "Why? Why would you do this?" I cried, cradling her head in my arms. "Because you can't have her," Jessica whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You were mine first. I won't let you forget me." Mia emerged from the car, pale and trembling. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice shaky. I looked up, horror dawning on my face as I met her terrified gaze. But before I could explain, Jessica's lifeless body lay still, and I could feel the darkness closing in around me. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The bright lights illuminated the scene like a nightmare come to life. As the paramedics rushed in, my world crumbled. Mia backed away, eyes wide with fear. I can't be here," she stammered, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. I can't be part of this." And just like that, she turned and ran, leaving me with the wreckage of my past and the weight of my choices. As the sirens drew nearer, all I could do was watch the love I had tried to build slip away, swallowed by the shadows of obsession. In the end, Jessica had claimed me once more, not as a lover, but as a ghost haunting my every step. And I was left alone, with nothing but regret and the painful reminder of what could have been.